third topic of the day is what we hope is added to the to the consoles. So this is spurred by the announcement or the rumors of the PS4 firmware 3.0 and the Xbox One's August update. So Xbox now has 1080p 60 game streaming. So you can just stream the games in what is essentially the now standard for video stuff. But the problem there is most of the Xbox One games aren't 1080 anyway. So this is just like...
Yeah, it was a little weird.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Cool for the future. They'll get the
future proofing, yeah.
You can now right-click on one of your friends and select send message or invite to party to more quickly connect with your friends. I'm sure that's something that people that do that are super stoked about. Notifications, you can enable or disable them for when you're invited to parties, which is awesome because we get that all the time when we're doing Let's Plays. You can see an animated display showing all your recently played games, so you can go into those. You can compare achievements with a friend. That's awesome.
That's fun.
They've updated My Games to support a grid view with the jump list where your games are now displayed in a grid alphabetically. And if you click on one, you can collapse it and stuff. So you can just organize your games better. You can manually add games to your collection. So ones that, for whatever reason, don't just automatically pop up. And yeah, so every month they're like constantly updating this stuff and like doing all this. And you were saying that this is like a thing that like Major Nelson announces on
Yeah, I think Microsoft does a really nice job with this actually because they make it a point to do something substantial to the console every month, which I think is cool. Sony is a little more sporadic and people are a little more sarcastic about Sony, and I don't blame them because Sony just releases random ass firmware updates that ruin people's lives because they just never stop. And they don't seem to do anything really substantial. But then 2.0 is substantial, 3.0 is rumored to be pretty substantial too. And yeah, the beauty of these consoles, and it goes back to almost the last question when someone was asking about what it was like, you know, what games should you go back and play and what were the consoles like. It was so funny, like, we have these consoles now, and I think we take it for granted. It really started with PS3 and Xbox 360, and Wii. And before that, really, you could fuck around with PS2 and PS1, like you just put them on, but they don't do anything. These consoles don't do anything. Like you turn on an NES without a cartridge, and it doesn't work. You know, and now we have these machines that will do. You can have a robust $400 experience on a PS4 without ever playing a game on it because it's just such a great entertainment hub. And the same thing with Xbox One, which is a little cheaper. So it's exciting to think about what these consoles could do and like what the future of these consoles might be, and not only in terms of games, but in terms of their functionality, which is why I'm so disappointed still that Microsoft kind of backed off on their original strategy because I really wanted to see what that was going to be. I was really curious about that. They had a totally different idea for their system. Now their system's just like a PS4. Which is great for gamers.
You're talking about the always on?
Just the always on, like they had a whole TV structure to it. They were gonna have a bunch of original shows on it. They were gonna do all these like sports interactivity.
Oh right, they had a Halo. Like they had a Spielberg Halo,
which is still apparently in production. But they shut down their whole. They shut down their whole TV division.
the Xbox originals.
Yeah.
So I was interested in that because it just seemed like it was such an exciting. It was hard to communicate it, but it could have been a very exciting thing if it worked out.
It's unfortunate too because that's sort of the name of the game right now, right? Is if you own the distribution platform or the streaming platform, which Xbox and Sony or Microsoft and Sony own, then the next natural step is to start creating your own content. And Sony's already doing it. I think they have. I don't watch any of their original programming, but I think they have Powers, right? Which is their first foray into the original programming, and they may have done one or two things before that, but it's cool. I mean, that's the future, right? And that's what I get excited about. Is like every day I know you guys check, you go play games. Well, guess what? I log on, or not log on. I fire up my PS4, and the first thing I do is check Netflix, see what's new on there, and then I'll go over to the actual movies and TV and see what's new to rent. Most notably, like recently, I just rented Gods and Monsters from there because I'd much rather give Sony money than Comcast. I'll just throw that out there. I can rent them on Comcast.
We have a war with Comcast,
but I'd much rather give Sony, a company that I support, the extra $5 here and there. But I would love to see more original programming come from them, and I would love to see them, utilize some of their licenses to make that programming because I think Sony has the leverage to do that. And that's when you start getting into a kind of a bigger discussion. But like, how many properties does Sony have access to that would make awesome TV shows or awesome Netflix shows or awesome HBO shows? If they could do that style of content, they have that audience that is there utilizing their console and like interacting with it every day for hours on end. That's not even something Netflix has. Like Netflix doesn't have the active user really. You start playing something and then it asks you if you want to autoplay the next one, and you're like, well, the controller's 2 feet away and I don't really want to reach over there. So I go, there's another Columbo episode going. But like with PS4, you've just got so much more to it, right? Ooh, sorry. So that's what I'd like to see more of. I'd like to see them get more content that I can watch and start getting more into the original content sphere. I don't know how well Powers is doing for them. That's the other problem is no one's actually like games
No
at
one
least
fucking
get
knows
reported
anything. Yeah.
numbers, right? There's a report every like what quarter of like what game sold what. But with all these new shows, we have no idea if any of them are doing well.
Yeah.
Zero. There's no metrics for them whatsoever.
So the rumored leaked list for PS4 firmware 3.0 updates, we got events that have been added to the function items. So all events that started with PlayStation are now brought together, enabling you to discover, participate in, and watch the events in a centralized area. Communities have been added to friends, so that's pretty cool. Kind of funny community. And
Yeah,
all
we'll
that
have
stuff.
a kind of funny community, presumably.
You can go to Now Playing to see what games or party members of the community are enjoying right now. The layout of the message screen has been improved. You can now broadcast your gameplay to YouTube, and you can upload clips straight to Twitter with a 10-second limitation. So that sounds thrilling for everybody.
A 10-second
10
limitation
second videos on Twitter.
on Twitter. Oh,
I didn't know that limitation existed. I thought it was just whatever length you wanted on Twitter, but maybe it's just this.
I think it's just on their end.
It's interesting. The layout of Live from PlayStation has been improved for the share features and stuff. On settings, you can change the speed for automatic text scrolling. There's more community stuff, so you can watch gameplay from, like if you're in a community, you can watch the gameplay from people that are streaming. And then other random stuff that you post your comments for activity and what's new. You can now enjoy conversations with your friends using like stickers and messages. PlayStation Plus has been added to the function items, so you can see all your benefits in one place. Accessibility features are now available when you're playing Blu-ray discs or DVDs. You can restrict the use of games while looking at age level information and rating icons, and you can create a sub-account for a minor by selecting new user. You can now adjust settings for web filtering services, blah, blah, blah. It's like a bunch of parental stuff that,
works for Jared.
yeah.
Jesus Christ.
Oh,
God damn,
that's too
Nick.
soon. That's too soon.
Jared Fogle, the Subway guy. So, what do you think about this, Colin?
Allegedly.
I don't know. It sounds cool. I mean, I
Allegedly
still think
works
that there's
for
some functionality that they need to add. The problem that we're going to start running into, I think, and this is a problem that was with PS3 and Xbox 360 as well, but so it might not be as extreme, but it might be over the years, is these consoles still have a very limited power range that they can really explore, and a limited amount. Their footprint is very limited in the sense of what they want to utilize system resources with to put onto the system that need to run all the time. So the more ambitious these consoles get, the more taxed the consoles are going to become, I guess is what I'm saying. And so this is something that they need to be very cognizant of. It's not a problem right now, but it could be a problem in the future, and it might affect the way games run and all that kind of stuff. So they have to be very careful about not adding too much to these consoles. PS4 needs to worry more about its infrastructure. PS4's PSN still doesn't work properly, and it's
In what way?
friends lists don't load, messages don't load, notifications don't load sometimes. Like it's just a very latent system still. It doesn't interact with the internet very well still.
Got it.
Things stream fine on it. Online play is great. It's a stupendous step in the right direction compared to PS3. There's no doubt about it. But they need to clean those things up. Obviously, they need to let people change their names still and do some database restructuring to make that easier, reconcile their trophy kind of database with their username database, which are two separate things right now, based on the way it was built. So I think there's a lot of like behind the scenes thing they need to add. But I'm pretty satisfied. I got to be honest with the way PS4 is right now, and Xbox One, which I've been messing around with more and more lately, is fine too. I don't like the way I don't like navigating PS4 or Xbox One. I think it's confusing. But it does a lot
I
of
think the PS4 is kind of confusing too.
I mean,
to be
my thing is,
perfectly honest.
I don't think any of the systems got it down in a non-confusing fashion. Like, every time I use them, there's always something. Whenever I'm trying to find something, it's harder than it should be.
360. I don't remember being that.
But I think that's
bad.
because you used it for so long.
You think so? Is it because I just interacted with the guy? Because I remember the first time I like started messing around with the cross media bar, because I wasn't, again, I had a 360. I put a small amount of games on it. Didn't mess around with PS3 at all. But I was amazed that when I fired up my PS4 for the first time and really started playing around with it, that I was like, I still don't necessarily have the memory of where things are. And that tells me that it's not necessarily the best UI design, Whereas after the first 3 or 4 times, it should just be kind of muscle memory of where you're going to turn the power off the system or updates or where your movies are or like where your Netflix is.
I still don't know how to turn the system off.
I don't know that you can turn the system off, to be perfectly honest.
You turn it off, unplug it, walk away, and it still starts beeping.
Yeah,
and
it's still
shit.
doing stuff and the light's still on, and like you plug it back in, you get an error message that pops up. It's like, hey, fucker, you didn't turn this off the correct way, and I'm disappointed with you. And I'm like, Dad? Is Dad in here?
Oh my God.
What's happening?
What's interesting about that is I was a PS3 guy last gen, not
Right.
360. So whenever I used someone's 360, I was like fucking lost. But the cross media bar made sense to me. But I think that's because I'd used it on the PSP,
Right.
used it on the PS3. So I'm just like, all right, I get this. I understand if I'm turning the system off, go to the left, go up.
Right.
Like it was muscle memory. Games, you go to, you know what I mean? At least it kind of broke it down. Going now, it's way more of like a Windows 8 style tile thing on both PlayStation and much more so on Xbox.
I like that. I like that design though. Like, and I actually didn't. A lot of people gave. I haven't messed around with the Xbox One that much, but when I remember distinctly when the 360 went from the blading structure to that more tile structure, I was like, this makes a lot more sense. Now I can understand where my content's grouped and how it's grouped. And I only have like 4 or 5 main screens where I can just kind of shift through, and that's where my apps are. Cool. Okay, my apps are right there. And then you can like pin them to your home screen, so you could just really kind of customize it that way. I don't know if you can do the same thing with PS4, but like that was one of the cool things that I liked, was you could go in and just kind of star what you wanted, and then your home screen would be like, you would blade over right, and that's all where all my stuff would be. And I only use like 3 of them. It's like Netflix and the movies, and that was pretty much it. And so yeah, I mean, it's still a little confusing, a little clutter for me. Even when I pop in a game and I'm like, wait a minute, why are there 3 games like that are listed on my cross media bar? Like, I don't understand that. Like, shouldn't that just be its own category of games that I've played and things like that? So I don't think they've perfected it just yet.
I mean, to be fair, like these days there is so much going on that I don't know if there is
but there's not really that much going on.
Well, there is
really. It's all going on in apps. Like that's from my perspective what I'm looking at. Like from how I utilize it, I'm like, there's the one screen that's just TV that I constantly go to, and I go down, and there's like HBO Now. And
well, what I'm saying is, it's like there's a lot going on because it's not just popping a fucking game and it starts playing.
That's true. That's very true.
It's like, where's your saves? Where's your games? Where's the apps that you recently downloaded that are installing? Where's the new stuff that the store's promoting? Where's the store? Where's the Twitter and the this and that? It's like, where's the messages popping up from your friend invites? Where, you know what I mean? There's so much.
A lot of stuff.
And it's like, it's not just like there's a video app that's all your video stuff, because there's Netflix, but then there's also them recommending powers, because you know, maybe the 3rd recommendation will get you to actually click it. You know, it's like there's all of this stuff happening. And like that is something that I'm like, wait, do I have this game or do I need to download this game when it has like icons of it and stuff? And it gets confusing. Now, using it for, like, I'm complaining, but it's like, if you don't eventually understand it, you're just not paying attention.
That's the problem too, right? Is it like, it's like your iPhone, where you're like, everyone's like, oh, the iPhone's the easiest thing on the planet to it's very intuitive and this and that. Still, there's a learning curve to it, right? There's a level of learning that you have to have for any of these things, because beyond a certain point, beyond just putting a disc in and having it play, you gotta figure out how things work. You have the fundamental understanding of what an app is and how to download it. That was also one of the things that when I started downloading games and downloading updates, I'm like, what is this process? Because it asks you like 8 times whether you want to download something, and then there's an update, and the update file goes for, you're like, all right.
Do you want to turn off your console after this finishes downloading or installing something? It's like,
no.
holy shit, I want to play the game as soon as possible.
Yeah. And then also the power, the fact that it is kind of always on, still it mystifies me. I'm like, what? I can't turn this thing off. Yeah, that's it. I mean, maybe a permanent option to turn off the damn light on the controller would be amazing too, so it doesn't go through a controller every hour that I'm watching Netflix.
Did you dim it? You can dim it.
I did.
Your controller should last longer than an hour. Rumble a lot really makes your controller
it lasts like 3 hours, and then it gives me the error message of like, hey, just FYI, this is out. You won't be able to control anything with this, and then it is done. It's done.
Yeah, that's what it says directly.
You won't be able to control
the one thing
anything.
that I want, and I know this isn't so much like a firmware update as much as a big change, but I want more classics. Like, I want a dedicated virtual console style system on the PSN. They did it last time with PS3 and like PS4. I guess PS Now was there's so much PS's in there. But PS Now is kind of their answer to that, but it's not an answer.
No, what's so funny about that, man, is that Microsoft just blew them out of the water with backwards compatibility, which I still think I stand by, and I said it at E3, and I'll say it again. That was probably the biggest announcement at E3, because they did something that they shouldn't have been able to do. The Xbox One was not supposed to be able to do that, and they figured it out. And it proved to me that Microsoft's really trying on the software side to make it work. I mean, this is a fancy way to emulate games, basically, but it's awesome that they did that, and they just took Sony's $400 million investment in this company and in Gaikai and with PlayStation Now and just fucking blew it up. Because now they're just saying like, well, we don't need to, like, you invested in this for backwards compatibility. We have real backwards compatibility, or it's virtual backwards compatibility, but we have a whole back catalog of games. Now suddenly, as long as they start activating them and publishers give them permission, they can have hundreds and hundreds of new games on the Xbox One by the end of all this. Meanwhile, Sony has a system that just based on, even if things are working at the speed of light, which they are through Ethernet cables throughout the country, like, there's going to be latency, there's going to be problems, things aren't going to work.
Graphics aren't going to look quite as good. There's going to be like weird jaggies and
man,
stuff.
They really shoved their fucking boot up Sony's ass with that one. I really think that's still an understated kind of thing, because Sony looked stupid now. Sony looks dumb now with this. They're like, we Microsoft's like, we have backwards compatibility with the Xbox 360's Xbox Live. That's basically what it is. And you can download all of these games as long as we have permission to do that or whatever. They're going to continue to roll these games out. And Sony's like, well, and they're like, oh, by the way, if you already owned it on Xbox 360, well, you own the game. So you get Mass Effect for free. You're going to get Fallout 3 for free or whatever. Sony's like, well, if you own Catherine on PS3, you can pay us again to play it on PS4. You know? And I'm like...
Through PS Now.
Through PS Now. And I'm like,
which is not
Louise, man.
ideal for anyone.
Yeah, I was like, when I saw that, I was like, I really feel like... I know people think it's a big deal and that they're excited about it, but I'm like, that is the big deal out of that conference. I'm like, that is a really, really bold move. You know,
especially when my PS3 is sitting there with all these PS1 classics on it that I love. You know, anytime we do Let's Plays in here, I can't just download them from PS4. I need to bring my PS3
to each other.
It's so, but that seems silly to me, right? And I understand there's a lot more intricacies, and from a layman's terminology, like I'm not getting a lot of. Like I forget who we were talking to at E3. One of the devs that came on our post conference breakdown. Nathan,
Vela.
Yeah, Nathan Vela was like, no, it's really complicated, and there's a lot of different architecture that you have to deal with, and this, that, and the other thing. But to me, I'm like, how is that any different than PC gaming, right? Because these are essentially just PCs at this point, right? They're just consoles that have chipsets, they have graphics cards, they have an operating system. They're running. I don't understand how it's that complex, and part of me has to think that it's still. There's a lot of business that plays into it too, right? And obviously, it's not a priority for them to make this happen because it costs a lot of money, and to your point, you do end up rebuying the games, right? So there is a loss of revenue if you make everything backward compatible as opposed to having another system where you have to rebuy the game.
But even then, though, what I'm saying about PS3, you had to rebuy the games.
Yeah, but what I'm saying, like, so look at what's happening with the Uncharted collection, right? They release these collections, then all of a sudden you end up paying again for a game that you've already played, or if you're like me, you've never played, and you're like, cool, this is an opportunity to play like maybe up-res versions of what's going on with the original games.
If they just offered it digitally, people would just rebuy them. Like, that's not ideal. Of course, I want them free, but it's like, if they released the Crash Bandicoot 1, 2, and 3 on PS4, I would buy it.
Right.
You know? But it's like they're just not doing that because of PS Now.
Yeah,
gotcha.
that was one of the things that I walked away from with at E3 with Microsoft's stance too. Is I'm like, wow, this is a bold move because this costs a lot of money. They dedicated a lot of engineers to this. When you read about it and learn and talk and you know you've learned about the things that people talk to Phil Spencer and these guys, like they dedicated a lot of resources to this. They made it happen. It wasn't supposed to be possible. They made it possible. And now they've shot themselves in the foot.
But see, I don't know.
They've shot themselves in the foot releasing like collections really now. Like not only themselves, but also their partners. Because now, like Mass Effect Trilogy, I thought for sure was a shoe-in for something that was going to happen before the Andromeda came out, probably like next summer or something like that. And they'll probably still release it, but a lot of people are going to be like, I can just download them now. So like there's no money to be made there. But Microsoft's not stupid. That was a calculated effort to be like, look at like what we're doing. This is a pro-consumer move. Aren't you happy? You know? And Sony, meanwhile, sitting there being like counting their nickels and their dimes, which they have to do because they're a struggling company. And they're looking at this $400 million investment, and it's like, man, maybe you should have taken some of that money and invested in some engineers that would have just made PS4 backwards compatible with PS3 in some way, or the PSN backwards compatible with the PSN from PS3.
To give them credit for it, though, I mean, PS Now in idea is amazing. Like it is really them trying to be the Netflix for PlayStation games, and that's an awesome goal. It's just you got to be the Netflix then. Don't be the freaking Vidmo or whatever the hell you know what I mean? Like failed ass.
Right.
Things.
Well, I mean, that's my thing, though, because for Sony, I can understand a little bit differently, right? Because the difference in their the chipsets was way crazier, right? They had the cell processor in PS3, and now they're on a more traditional set of processors. But for Microsoft, that's why I get that it was hard, and I'd love to read the article. I don't want to misspeak, but at the same time, I'm like, isn't it just like a more powerful version of the 360? Like,
no, I think that's oversimplifying.
Is that
360, I mean, 360 was easier to develop for, but
it's
it
still
doesn't mean
C++ architecture, though, right? It's still the same. Wasn't it the same similar architecture? Which is
I don't presume to know that. All I know is that
I'm good with talking on my ass.
All I know is that it's difficult. It's like we've had conversations with Sony about the very act of changing your name on PSN is going to cost them like millions of dollars if they want to really do it. Like they need to figure out a way to engineer these things. Like there's huge systemic problems on the networks that everything always seems more easier on the outside until you have to actually make it work.
Sure. I mean, you're talking about a lot of
these
data.
aren't dumb people. I mean, the people at Sony and Microsoft that are engineering these consoles are not stupid. Like they, and it's a matter they can solve it. It's just a matter of saying like, how many resources do we have to dedicate to this, and is it worth it? And to Sony, they're locked in now. It reminds me a lot of what I was saying about 3D gaming. Like when we got into N64 and Saturn and PS1, and there was this problem presented to the developers about, well, what does a 3D game look like? And Nintendo went in a way of like, we're going to make an open world that doesn't have a lot of textures and stuff like that. And Naughty Dog was like, we're going to make our game really pretty and vibrant, and it's going to be 3D, but it's kind of like linear and stuff. And Sega made their own solution with Knights, which is kind of
not really a solution.
Yeah, not really a solution at
I
all.
love Knights,
but the point is that they all had the same problem, and they found different solutions. And we're at a similar thing now, where it's like we have a problem with backwards compatibility, no backwards compatibility, no access to the old libraries. Sony's solution was we'll stream them, and Microsoft's solution was we'll just invest a lot of money into the architecture to make them free, as long as you already own them. And those are just two solutions to the same problem. Yeah. And just like Mario 64 was probably the right solution, ultimately, in terms of influencing everything around it.
It's the same thing they did last gen, too, with the 360.
Sure.
There was just downloadable firmware updates to let you play at Xbox games.
And so that's what I'm saying is like I really feel like a lot of this has to do with the business strategy behind it, right? Of like creating that artificial demand and then all of a sudden going like we quote unquote figured out a way. And I'm sure that is the way it worked. I'm sure they did a cost benefit analysis and was like it's not worth the initial upfront investment of making these consoles completely backward compatible. But at the same time, like wouldn't it have been easier if they just did that? You know, I mean, knowing that they had to utilize this strategy and it was probably a big shift considering their poor showing 2 E3s ago of coming out and saying we need to get back in the public graces. But at the same time, it's like they're building the console, right? So why couldn't they build that functionality into the basic beginning of it? And the only thing that they can, the answer is they can, because Microsoft already proved it. So it's not impossible. Something they thought was quote unquote impossible suddenly becomes possible a year later.
But it's not. But that's the point. It's specifically the difficulty with PS4 is that PS4 to run native PS3 games would need the cell processor in the box.
Sure.
They need a way to figure out, much like Microsoft did, I think, the way to emulate the games. Yeah. You know, and I think that's like what they're doing. Like there needs to be. And this would solve the problem with PS1 and PS2 classics too. A way to just emulate the PS3 on the PS2, or on the PS4 rather.
Well, what's crazy with the PS3 was depending on which PS3 you had, some were backwards compatible completely.
Yeah, they took it out.
Some were kind of backwards compatible, and most of them just weren't at all. And it's like, what the fuck?
Wasn't first generation? No.
The first one, there was a more expensive one that was backwards compatible.
And then they just stopped doing
last one wasn't. And then the second generation one, which is the one I had, was semi-compatible. Like some games worked, some games didn't, depending on who God knows what. And then eventually they're like, fuck it, we're just not going to have it.
But they did that for the same reason that they're doing this now, which is like they can't release collections and milk that old generation and do PS2 classics. You can just put fucking PS2 games in your PS3. It was so obvious why they did that. I mean, that's why people were so upset about it. But I understand.
That's why people should be upset about it. You should still be upset about it. Like these consoles, like from a user standpoint, you should be able to just take the other one out, put the other one in, and you should be able to play your back library of games if you have the physical media.
For me, I think it's even less about the physical at this point because I understand the technical limitations of the physical stuff. It's the digital stuff that blows my mind. Yeah. I can't believe that I can't just play all the PSN games. Like, why isn't PSN the console? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like
a cloud console, yeah. Like just having all your games stored, all your saves stored, and you just
again,
you literally
don't know how this
because
works.
That's the issue I have right now too. Is like these consoles seemingly have really long lifespans, but with the acceleration of how technological innovation's going, like they're already outdated, right? I mean, there's PCs on the market or even laptops on the market that seemingly have better processors in them because it's been 2 years since these consoles came out.
There were PCs when they launched that were better than
that. So like, how do you handle that, right? And like, I'm fine making the initial investment of like similar to a cell phone, like $300-400 every couple of years just to upgrade them, but not if I can't. Play all the games that I have in my library, and it's like
huge.
Yeah,
and it's interesting too,
which is crazy because isn't it the same with movies? If I buy a movie on PSN, can't I just have that across the board?
Presumably, yeah.
I've never tried. I don't buy movies anymore because why?
But that's the thing is it's really interesting that I'm sure there's details and reasons why this isn't a thing, but why don't we just have PSN accounts that we download games to and can play them on the different systems? Because if it's downloadable, why isn't it just playable?
Well, but that's. I understand why that isn't because the games are again they need. You shouldn't be able to download a PS4 game and play it on Vita, so it's not going to work.
Okay. Sorry, I'm not talking. And see, this is where it falls apart because
I'm oversimplifying.
Of the modern being able to download the full modern games. I'm talking about like the smaller games, like Limbo. You know what I mean?
Right, but again, you can't. I understand what you're saying, but that is a semantical issue in terms of like. Limbo just can't run on a Vita unless it's they do something to it because these are just totally different pieces of hardware. I'm telling you the point, and that's why PlayStation Now made sense because PlayStation Now was scalable, and that was what they were trying to do. PlayStation Now could be scaled to PS4 and PS3 and Vita, and then use like cloud processing to play the games or beam them to your system. That's why I'm saying it would just be great if the PS4 could emulate the PS3. That is the solution to the problem. Just emulate the fucking PlayStation 3. But again, we can easily, we're totally ignorant on these things.
We
Like,
just
we can say it
things.
all day, but I mean, that's the ideal
I mean-
situation. But I'm sure that there's a million reasons why they can't do it or they won't do it. Can they do it? Probably.
I guess what I'm saying is like with
I know
Limbo
they can. They
specifically,
can.
if you download Limbo, you
This
get
is
it
not-
for Vita and for PS3. You know, I guess those are just two different versions. But you download PS1 classics, you get them for both. For PSP and PS3 and Vita.
But they're emulating. But the emulator works on all the consoles. That's all on PS3 and Vita.
But why wouldn't that emulator work on PS4?
Because it's probably just not made for it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what I'm
So-
saying. Like it's not as easy as just saying like make it work on this and this. It's like, okay, like if you're making a game for I know a lot of developers that make games for PlayStation products, and it's not as easy just saying, all right, send the game to the Vita.
No,
like
I
look
know
at
that,
Axiom
but, like,
Verge. Axiom Verge has been delayed for like 6 months
Well, that's
on
also
Vita.
because
True.
they don't. I mean, it boils down to money. Let me put it to you blatantly, like plain English. It's all possible if you have the right amount of money behind it and time. Like, it's not impossible to make any game run on any console if you have enough money. This is not like solving the formula for fucking faster than light travel, right? Where we just don't have the math to do this yet, right? We haven't figured it out yet. This is just purely someone looking at a book and going, it's just too expensive. It's not going to make us enough money, so we cannot invest in this right now. And it makes sense. It's business. I get that. And it sucks. But like to say that like so we did something that we didn't think was possible, for Microsoft to say that, I'm like, well, then you really have no faith in your engineering staff because it's clearly possible they figured it out a year later.
Yeah,
like,
I think they were just. I mean, first of all, I'm sure that
It's like
part
out
of
of
it
their
is.
ass.
I'm sure part of it is like, look how hard we worked. But I'm also
get
sure
that.
a part of it is they probably weren't. I don't know if they didn't think it was necessarily possible as much, and I don't know the exact verbiage that they used, but it was something like that when we were watching the thing. Like we didn't, think we were going to be able to pull this off. Whatever they said.
Sure.
But it's more about them saying like we just didn't anticipate that we would ever have to do this, and then we wanted to do it. And the console was made and finalized probably in like 2011 when they started probably sending it out to everyone. So they're like, "This is the console we built, and we can't do anything about it now." Which is why I was so surprised that these consoles weren't a little more modular or something like that's why
That
I
was
like,
interesting too. That was
I was
what
really
would
surprised
assumed.
by that. Neither of them were like neither of them left open the possibility, at least that we know if you look at the ports on them and stuff, of being like we can expand this console later.
Isn't it? Well, I mean, you could though, technically speaking, because and maybe
Hard
I'm talking
drives, I think, are
you
the
could.
one
That's all you can.
way
But they don't
there.
have USB ports, do they?
They do have USB.
Oh, they
ports.
the controller ports are USB ports, right? So technically, you could add hardware similar to what Apple's doing with their PCs. I'm sure that there's a fair amount of programming, and I'm talking about ass again. But you know what Apple's doing with their Mac Pros is that they're just pure processors, and you add other hardware to it as you need it.
Yeah.
And I always assumed I assumed from the 64 on that was going to be what we were going to deal with from the rest of our lives. Like you have the box, and then you get upgrades to it for.
Yeah.
So the system lasts 10
But
years.
instead, we got a GameCube with a bunch of ports for things that never happened.
That's what I was gonna say. GameCube was a great example. PS2 has some weird ports too.
Yeah.
Vita has a weird port. Like there's it's just like we have no idea what the fuck they were for.
Right.
Well, GameCube, some of them were for like the Game Boy Player, and some of them were for
Ethernet
the
adapter
Ethernet
thing.
adapter and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I mean, we don't. I'm not going to sit here and act like any of us know the technical ramifications of it. But it would just be cool to be able to emulate, especially on PlayStation, just emulate the PS3. Just emulate the PS3 in some way.
Yeah.
That way, and then you can just go back and play.
See,
those
with
games.
PlayStation, I get that though, right? Because you are literally talking about a different cell or processing architecture.
But I mean, here's the thing. Let's take all of this out of it. I don't care.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's not my job to figure it out. Like,
It's true.
I just want this
You're the
shit.
consumer. You want it. You pay for it.
Like, the
you
thing is,
know.
I know it's not easy. I know whatever. But I'm just saying, it's like, none of that matters to me, man.
Yeah,
Like,
it sucks. It sucks because it seems like Sony has to strike that balance between being the company that everyone wants it to be and being profitable, right? And sometimes that's not always the same. Like when you're dealing with companies like Apple, whose business model is to make the best thing possible for the consumer, that's different, right? That and then you got Microsoft on the other side of that, right? That just kind of goes like, well, let's just give a ton of options that aren't necessarily the best, but they work and people can just pick and choose. Those are two separate. It's very, very hard to run a company like Apple, where you just make one or two products really, really well. And Sony, I think, is seeing that. They're a very, very, very freaking diverse company, and their entertainment side or rather their console side, for all accounts, I guess they're struggling. Are they struggling?
What, on games?
Yeah.
No, the games are they're profitable with
What about their console sales?
the console sales are mediocre. They're huge. PlayStation's fine.
PlayStation's
It's
fine.
most of the rest of the company that's not
Sony. So yeah, I mean, I get that, right? Like at some point you have to strike a balance. And you have to prioritize. Not everyone can just do whatever the hell they want to do. And so I realize that we're sitting here on our high throne talking about like, why don't you just fucking do it? And like, there's probably a couple engineers out there that are like, I'm gonna fucking kill these guys when we see them because it's not that simple. And I get it, we're oversimplifying it, but there's a need for it. There is a desire for it, and so it just sucks that they won't fulfill that.
Yeah.
It sucks that they won't be like, let's do what's right, not necessarily what's right for the company.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, it's the same thing as people out there that would be like, oh, why don't they just put the Patreon exclusive audio files of the podcasts on an RSS feed? It's like, well, we just can't. And that's like, I know you're right. We should. But we can't. It just
I sympathize.
doesn't work that way,
And at the end of the day, it's not the end of the fucking world either.
And then multiply the complication by 1 million, and that's what you're dealing with. We're trying to make the PS4 read the PS3.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's what I'm saying. These things would be ideal. Sony found a solution that they thought would work and be scalable amongst their platforms, including on tablets and phones eventually. So it makes sense. I just think that Microsoft cold clocked them, to be perfectly honest with you. I mean, I think that's a seminal point in this particular war between these two consoles. Not that Xbox One's going to overtake PS4, because I think it's PS4 has conceivably sold twice as many consoles as Xbox One. But to say that, I thought that was Phil Spencer is doing good hard work over there at Microsoft and is making fucking great decisions to make this to turn this thing around. And can you only imagine the Xbox One's power right now with consumers and on the market if they didn't fuck it up so badly in the beginning? This is how good they're doing. All things considered, PS3 or PS4 and Xbox One in their time up on the market as of the beginning of this month have sold 50% more units than PS3 and Xbox 360 at the same time. Mm-hmm. So these consoles are killing. These consoles are fucking killing. And that shouldn't be lost in all of this either. Mm.